Morning, everyone. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about strategic marketing planning. And the main goal of this chapter is to give you insight on how marketers look ahead. Strategic planning is forward looking, it's aimed to look at where is the company now and where does it want to be? And what does the company need to do in order to get from where they are today and to where they want to be? So, in talking about strategic marketing planning, we're going to talk about the elements of the strategic planning process. Now, some of this should be a little familiar with what you might have learned in a management course, because strategic planning is often the same, except when we talk about marketing, it's a little more nuanced. And so we're going to talk about also the specifics and the purpose and the components of a marketing plan as well. So again, strategic planning is forward looking, and successful firms generally engage in a lot of strategic planning. They're recognizing that customers' needs change, the environment changes, and so too should the company as well. And so ultimately, strategic planning is meant to provide insights regarding resource allocation, such as where the company should be investing or devoting attention to different areas and where they should allocate resources. This slide gives an overview of the strategic planning process. Please note that strategic planning can be relatively straightforward. We can have marketing plans that are specific to a certain P if we were to talk about the 4 Ps. Like you might just have a marketing plan regarding promotion. Okay, very common. And so they can be very straightforward, or they can be very, very complex and be much broader in picture. In today's world, oftentimes strategic planning requires partnering with other firms, such as your vendors or suppliers. And oftentimes, strategic plans end up needing to change. You might get into the implementation and suddenly need to switch what you intended to do. A great example I think of this is back to the COVID days, when suddenly companies needed to drastically change their marketing plans because they couldn't do what they intended to do. And also certain products were flying off the shelves. There were limited inventory, limited issues, with supply chain capabilities and so forth. And so companies needed to create drastic changes with their implementation. When talking about strategic planning, I do want to mention that strategic planning generally requires coordination across multiple levels. So if you're talking about a very large firm, you're going to need to coordinate your plans and your strategy with the overall corporate mission and with the particular business or unit or division that you operate in. And so here, this picture just illustrates that at the top level of an organization, and again, this is for a very large firm, your top management tends to focus on the broader issues, such as what is the corporate mission? What are the goals of the company? What are the objectives? And I want to mention here, it says goals and objectives. They can kind of mean the same thing. Oftentimes what we see when we're talking about marketing plans is that the goals are more subjective, whereas your objectives are measurable. They're more precise. So, for instance, the goal might be to increase sales or increase customer satisfaction. And then the objective is how you're going to measure it. We're going to increase transaction size by 30%, or we are going to have a retention rate increase of 15%. So it's something more objective, something that's more measurable. And so that's why objectives tend to be a little bit different than goals. Okay, so you have your broad overall corporate mission and the more macro issues that gets assessed at the corporate level. And then at the business unit level, so if you think about different businesses housed within an overall business, these too can have their own missions and their goals. And later this week, we have Gordon Wade coming in, who worked for Nestle Purina for many, many years. And I have a feeling he's going to talk about the different business units or the different brands that Nestle Purina is responsible for. And you can probably see, perhaps through his presentation later, that each of those units had a very different mission to some extent at times, given the different customer segments that they were tapping. So at the business unit level, there can be different missions, goals, and objectives, but ultimately they should align or be in harmony with the overall corporate mission and goals. And sometimes you can think about the business unit strategy having different strategies for different departments. So sometimes you can see the marketing department will create their own marketing plan and have their own strategy. The production department might have their own strategy. The financial department may have their own strategy, human resources, and other functional areas as well. And so, big picture speaking, your unit will come up with goals or objectives. So what is it that the company wishes to obtain? The strategy, when we're talking about marketing strategy, is the 4 Ps. How are you going to align your marketing strategy, your product, your placement, your promotion, and your pricing so that, sorry, my alarm's going off to go to class, and as you know, that's not happening today. But anyhow, your 4 Ps relate to your marketing strategy. How are you going to develop a marketing mix, or your 4 Ps, so that they help you align or help you obtain those missions and objectives? Then you implement it. That's the how. Okay, so what exactly you're doing, and you evaluate it and assess it. And that's what evaluation and control stands for. So what are you looking at? Are you looking at sales? Are you looking at average transaction size? Are you looking at retention rates? Are you looking at click-through rates? The metric that's being measured should always relate back to the goal or the objective. And so this evaluation and control can happen throughout while the strategy is being executed, which may signal to you that your company may need to change the implementation. Your hope is that it's working and things are improving and you're trying to obtain your goal, but that's not always going to happen. And it may suggest that the company may need to change its pricing, or it may need to change its promotion. It may need to change its placement. And so ultimately, that's what evaluation and control metrics are for, is to alert you not only to the performance, but what might need to be changed. So I have this on here just as an illustration of how companies might have different strategic business units. If you hear me say an SBU, I'm referring to a strategic business unit. Again, I realize that some of you have not had marketing and exposure here before. This is like your first marketing class, because many of you have very different backgrounds. And so to give you just kind of a overarching feel for what this means is that if you think about a very large company like General Mills is divided up in many different units. And so they have different units such as the Big G, which is their cereals, and they hold many different brands there. And they have their baking division, which is like Betty Crocker Biscuit, Gold Medal Flour. They have yogurts, and such as Yoplait Light. They also have a snacks division, which includes Fruit Roll-Up, Nature Valley, among others. They have meals, such as Hamburger Helper, Progressive Soup, and Jolly Green Giant. And they have Pillsbury. And there might even be more divisions at General Mills beyond just this. And oftentimes when large companies like General Mills, when they divide up into different units, each unit may have its own strategic plan or its own marketing plan. Okay, because you might be able to see the person who's maybe eating Yoplait may be very different than the customer who might be eating Hamburger Helper, and so the companies especially large companies, divide themselves up into different units, oftentimes where within the unit, you're dealing with a very similar customer segment. And so then you craft marketing plans to reach that specific segment. And so there might be, a different marketing plan for each of these, what do I have here? 6 different divisions. And so again, a division could be like, by me meaning a division or a strategic business unit, an SBU could be a product line or it could be a single product. Okay, it depends on how the company defines that unit, and each SBU might pursue its own mission and develop its own strategic plan. Talk about the strategic planning process. Okay, strategic planning, and we're going to talk about this in more detail in the next few slides, begins with the situation analysis, which we're going to talk about more in chapter 3. But ultimately, what the firm is doing is it's examining its internal environment, so looking at what's all happening in the firm, such as its strengths, its resources, its capabilities, and also comparing that to the external environment. What's going on in the external environment? How do the firm's resources, strengths, and capabilities compare with competitors? How does the firm's internal environment fit with what's going on with customers, with the external environment? We talked about those different external forces like technology or the economy, regulatory forces, and so forth, socio-demographic or sociocultural changes, and so forth. And so we'll talk about that more later on. But again, it's to look at the overall situation. What's going on with the firm? What can the firm do? What can't it do? And what's going on in the external environment that might allow for the company to exploit its strengths or opportunities while mitigating threats and weaknesses. So based on these issues identified in the strategic or the situation analysis, the company should establish its mission or vision, its goals and its objectives, and then develop a strategy on how it's going to obtain its goals or its objectives. And so the marketing plan is really the outline of marketing activities. Okay, what is the organization going to do in regards to its marketing activities so that it meets its goals? It also indicates how resources will be allocated for different marketing activities, who's going to be responsible for those activities, and when they're going to happen. Oftentimes there's an implementation schedule. And the book provides an example of a marketing plan and an implementation schedule. I'm sure you can also find them online, and I highly recommend you to look at those. But again, not all marketing plans look the same. They're going to look very different depending on the size of the company, the industry or the market in which they compete in, and the overall customer segment, and also the goals and objectives of the firm. And so not all marketing plans look alike, though they tend to have very similar sections, so to say. And so that's why in the marketing plan project, if you were assigned that for a course project, all student teams are to complete certain sections of the marketing plan, though they may look very different depending on the firm each team selects. So let's talk about the mission and the vision. Okay, and again, I realize you might have had this in a different class, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. So the mission answers, what business are we in? It should be clear and concise. And so it explains why the business exists. The vision addresses who the firm wants to become. It's usually future oriented, oftentimes has like a goal statement in it. So mission statements are not meant to be confidential. They're oftentimes used in building relationships and promoting the organization. They might be used in annual reports or on websites or any sort of promotional tool the company might utilize. And so here I have a couple of examples here particular to the Harvard College of Business. And so here it says the Harvard College of Business is dedicated to producing highly desirable graduates and generating knowledge that drives diverse business thought and sustainable business practice. Now, the college recently, as of this summer, and I'm not sure that it has been published, but I'm going to say this anyway. Recently went through a strategic planning process in which we have a strategic plan that is 10 years old. And we made some revisions to this. It was a very lengthy process, still similar enough, so that's why I kept this in here now. But I envision that we will start seeing our new mission used on our website and used in our promotion materials that are sent to donors and also prospective students and so forth. Our vision, again, is future-oriented. Who do we want to become? And so here's the vision: to be recognized nationally as one of the elite public business schools in the country. And I'm happy to say that the Harvard College has received national rankings very high for many, many different programs. So that is really great. So that being said, you can kind of see the difference in the wording here. Similar, but different. So this is what business are we in? Where do we want to go? Who do we want to become? Now, typically after, the mission and vision are drafted, you set your goals, your strategies, your budgets. That sort of information is not shared externally. Okay, those more specific goals and strategies stay within a company in most instances. But ultimately, I do want to say here that the mission and vision should align with the firm's strengths and the core competencies. What does the firm do best? Okay. What is another way to think about it is what is it that the company has that it's hard for the other firms to imitate? And so when drafting the mission and vision, you should ask yourself, what does the firm do best that they can capitalize on when it comes to that resource and that capability? When the external environment changes, sometimes it means that the mission needs to change. And so we may see at times that firms will slightly change or maybe drastically change their mission when it no longer aligns with the firm's capabilities or the external environment. And when missions change, everything else regarding a firm's strategy likely changes. Okay, because it might be new technology, new customers, new opportunities, which leads to a very drastic change in the direction of the firm. Okay, so after drafting the mission and the vision, firms tend to create functional goals and objectives. And again, functional goals, here I'm thinking specific to marketing. What are the marketing goals and objectives? And they ultimately must support the organization's overarching mission and goals. And objectives, again, relate to specific quantitative measurements. And so, for example, the business unit goal might be to increase ROI, and then the marketing objective might be to increase sales X%. Okay, so another example might be something like the overarching goal is to increase satisfaction, where the objective is to increase the repeat purchase amount of XYZ dollars, or increase the average transaction size to XYZ. They're usually much more, again, objectives are much more precise than goals. Another example I can give you too is, as I mentioned, the Harvard College recently went through strategic planning, and my marketing department is about to go through strategic planning as well this spring. And so while as a college we have overarching goals and objectives, we as a department of marketing are also going to be creating goals and objectives and initiatives within our department. And while they are unique to the marketing department, they will definitely be in line with the college's goal that relates to providing an exceptional student experience. So again, while different, we're still in harmony, okay, or still in agreement with the overarching college's objectives. So objectives might include a variety of different things here. You know, as I mentioned, they're measurable. Okay, so here I have things listed here as different examples, but there are many more aspects that can be measured. You know, right here, I really don't have anything on dealing with online engagement, such as click-through rates or the sharing or engagement rates, like we talked about liking or commenting on a post. And so many, many more different ways to measure goal attainment exist. So please keep that in mind and don't feel like this is it, okay? Because there could be things such as market share, sales per square foot, and so forth, many other things. So the functional strategy then for marketing deals with selecting a target market. You know, who's the customer that you're going after, and what is the marketing program going to look like that's going to satisfy the target market or that particular customer segment or segments, okay? Sometimes we see companies tap multiple segments or different customer groups. Sometimes it's going after one particular segment. And so the marketing strategy, again, deals with selecting the target market and then developing a marketing mix, your 4 Ps, specific to that segment or segments. The implementation then is the execution of the marketing strategy, okay? And when we talk about execution, there really are 2 different audiences for execution. The employees, which are internal to the company, managers, executives, frontline employees. And when I say frontline employee, it means the employees that interact with customers. And why it's so important to get the employees on board is because oftentimes they're the ones who are executing the plan, right? If you're looking at, let's just say Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A has these certain goals, maybe it's to increase customer satisfaction rating to, 5 out of 5. Who's delivering? Who's responsible, or who's the key party involved to creating that customer satisfaction? It's likely your employees, the people that give the food to the customer in the drive-through or who help with ordering in store. And so those employees are critical to shaping the customer experience. And so very important to get them on board. And that's just an example there in a B2C environment. Another example could be in B2B sales. When you're talking about businesses selling to other businesses, your sales executives, your sales reps, all of those folks are very, very critical to the firm obtaining its objectives. Okay, so frontline employees need to be on board. Now, your external and then your implementation, obviously will be creating a plan that's going to affect, your customers, maybe even your suppliers or investors. And so after you implement it, or as you implement your marketing strategy, you evaluate it. Okay, the evaluation and control phase is to keep the firm on target with its goals and objectives. So here, we're going to be looking at things that can be measured. Okay, and so again, a variety of different metrics can be used here. And oftentimes we use the word KPI. And for some of you in this class, you might not know what that means. It means a key performance indicator. And so depending again on the firm, depending on the goal, there can be a variety of different key performance indicators that are actively being monitored on a marketing dashboard to determine, how is the the plan performing. Okay. Now, it used to be, I will say, that plans got executed, then you measured them, and then only after, a significant amount of time would you, measure, get the data back, and then implement any changes. Nowadays, because of technology, we are oftentimes getting sales data, performance data in real time, right? We can gather or see what's going on with customers as soon as, they're on our website or engaging in a purchase or providing instant feedback if it's online or like on social media or through a customer survey. And so we're getting data much quicker. And in turn, marketing plans and their implementation are being adapted or modified much sooner than I would say like a decade ago. So we're seeing that with strategic planning, it really is a never-ending process because we're monitoring the information as it comes in, and that might signal, hey, we've got to adapt this and make this change. And so it oftentimes is both an ending and the beginning to a certain action that the company aims to take. So the marketing plan identifies specific actions for the marketing program. So again, there can be plans for different functional areas. Like there could be an HR plan. There could be a production plan. That the marketing plan is specific activities that relate to marketing. And so when we talk about the marketing plan, again, it can be written in many different ways. And that's why I can't wait to see the marketing plans that y'all come up with, because I know that they're going to look very different depending on the company and the goals that you develop. And so marketing plans can be specific for certain products, for certain brands, or certain target markets or industries. And so they can focus on a specific element of the marketing program. Like I said before, you might just focus on promotion, or you might just focus on new product development. And then ultimately, the plans will get adjusted according to market conditions. Again, like going back to what I've been saying, is that as changes happen and you're monitoring those changes or the performance, you're going to adjust your marketing plan accordingly. So whereas strategic plans, which again, I realize that you take a strategic plan or strategic management course, when you talk about long-term strategy, usually you think a 3 to 5 year time horizon. Typically with a marketing plan, it's 1 year, because it's reviewed annually and adjusted according to marketing or market conditions. So while the strategic plan guides resource allocation, it's the marketing program that oftentimes needs to succeed in order for the firm to obtain those long-run performance objectives. Again, going back to my comment, if you don't have sales, your company is not likely going to stay in business very long. Marketing plans are critical. So let's talk about a marketing plan. So again, we're going to talk about a situation analysis in the next chapter, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that now. But each plan tends to have an executive summary that gives an overview of the plan, introduces major aspects of the plan, like the objectives, sales projections, cost or performance measures, and likely identifies the scope and the time frame for the plan. An executive summary is very important because sometimes when these plans are pitched to top executives, it's the only thing that gets read. So you need to make a very persuasive executive summary. There's an example in your textbook. I encourage you to look at it. But again, if you remember and you've looked at my grading rubric for the cases and for the overarching project, I mentioned how it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And so you need to sound persuasive in your executive summary. And that's why, marketers need to be able to sell themselves, sell their ideas. And that's why I have it as a critical element in your, in both your cases and your project in terms of how you're graded. So make sure your work sounds compelling. So you have the executive summary. Then the plan often begins, I should say the heart of the plan, or I want to say the thick plan, but what goes beyond that executive summary comes next, right? So you have your situation analysis, which looks at where the company is today, where does it want to be, okay? And so it will summarize all pertinent information related to the internal environment, the customer environment, and the external environment. Okay, and it might even summarize the company's current marketing objectives and performance. It might even examine the customer environment to look at, how is the company currently meeting the customer needs, and how might these needs change, and what sort of adaptations are necessary. And finally, when talking about the external environment, again, we're talking about those uncontrollable factors such as competitive, economic, social, political, or regulatory issues, technology changes, and so forth. Okay? All of these exert pressure on the marketing activities, and so marketers must adapt. Okay? And then ultimately, the information that is obtained internally or externally within the situation analysis oftentimes is organized through a SWOT analysis. And so a SWOT analysis, as you might recall, stands for strengths, weaknesses, both of which are internal to the company, opportunities and threats, which are external to the company. And so what companies might do is organize the information obtained into a SWOT analysis to really help refine the information to understand, okay, what are the strengths and opportunities that we can exploit? What are the weaknesses and threats that we need to mitigate? And so to help guide their decision making. Now, in talking about a situation analysis, I want to mention this, that an important step is often engaging in an in-depth examination of market attractiveness and the firm's competitive position for each product market a business serves or is considering serving. Okay, so I want to mention, I'll give you an example right here. I just read in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, it was talking about Walmart, which most of you would probably agree, low cost provider, has focused on low pricing. Well, they're trying to tap more wealthy customers. So they're looking at changing their marketing mix around, particularly with their products. And they were talking about the brand Beautiful, which is Drew Barrymore's brand. And I can't remember, I want to say there was an espresso machine that was $1,000+ that they were bringing in. So they were changing their product line, changing their marketing mix around a little bit to try to tap a more wealthy consumer segment, right? And so the wealthy segment is attracted to different products than Walmart's kind of core customer. So in thinking about Walmart in the back of my mind here, I think they're an illustration of how when Walmart looked at this sort of product market combination, so kind of more expensive products for the more wealthier customer segment, they found it to be very attractive and that they felt like they could compete in that space, that their competitive position was good. I'll share that article as an announcement so you can read through it. But I think that's a good example of how, for that particular market product combination, Walmart found that it was compelling for them to move forward in that space. So when I talk about attractiveness here, I will say that industry forces that influence market attractiveness differ from one industry to another. Okay. And so again, not all industries are going to be the same. Okay. And so here it could be life cycle position. Is it in a growth phase of the product life cycle? Is the growth rate high? Does the market size, is it sizable? What's the competitive environment look like? Can the firm, do they have the capabilities to compete within that competitive space? How difficult or easy is it to access those consumers? Now, for competitive position, you're looking at the relative market share. You know, what is our current market share? What could it be? How does our brand align with that market? Does it resonate? What does our product performance look like in that space? What's the service quality we can offer in that space or for this particular market? And do we have a cost advantage, you know, compared to other competitors? And so marketers will be looking at both, you know, how attractive the market it is and how the firm kind of scores up next to competition in regards to these elements. And I should also mention here, when I was talking about Walmart attracting kind of more wealthy consumers, a lot of it stems from the fact that Amazon has been able to grow their home sales at a relatively high pace compared to Walmart and tap those wealthy consumers better than what Walmart has been doing. And so Walmart essentially saw that as a growth opportunity and in a space where they could hopefully compete in. But we'll have to see. I have not bought any of Drew Barrymore's products. I have not bought the super expensive espresso machine that they talk about. But I certainly, when I think about Walmart, I have a very different perception than Amazon. And so my underlying gut instinct is telling me that Walmart might struggle a little bit with this simply because of its brand positioning as a low cost, and intuitively people link cost with quality, potentially low quality products. And so that association that consumers have with the brand hurts them a little bit, I think, compared to the brand association consumers have with Amazon. But Walmart's got the resources to figure it out. So we'll just have to keep watching that. But I think it's a great example for how Walmart saw an opportunity and they're going to try to exploit it. So going back to the SWOT example again, is that after marketers obtain this information throughout their external analysis and internal analysis, they oftentimes will shape or allocate or align that information with it, or take that information and link it to a SWOT analysis. So looking at what does the firm do well internally that you want to build on? What does the firm not do well that it wants to correct? What are some external opportunities? Okay, so what are some forces or things that are happening in the external environment that might be an opportunity for the firm? And what are the threats? What might be some threats or what's going on in the external environment that the company wants to avoid? Okay, so again, this helps marketers think more strategically about the information they have so that they can shift their strategy to ultimately build on a strength and exploit an opportunity. This is an example I used Copilot on, full disclosure. I love playing around with AI and I think there's a lot of benefits to it. So I had it do this for McDonald's. And this is what it created. So you can see here that all of these issues that it created for McDonald's as a strength are internal to the company, right? It owns brand recognition. It owns its menu, its supply chain, its marketing and loyalty programs. So that, again, strength internal, all controlled by the company. Weakness, controlled by the company. Has issues with employee turnover. The franchise model. Consumer perceptions of the products. Vulnerability to commodity prices. Opportunities. Emerging markets. Delivery or digital ordering platforms. Again, see, opportunities, things that are going on, technology, cultural changes. Can't control them, but they're benefiting or potentially beneficial for the firm. Possible plant-based or sustainable menu items. Leveraging technology to enhance the customer experience. For instance, using AI in drive-through orders. Speeding up that so employees can be allocated to perhaps prepare food faster. What are the threats? Intense competition. Customer preferences, again, that cultural change towards healthier foods, regulatory pressures, and economic downturns impacting discretionary spending. See, all of these are external to the firm that the firm can't control, but you want to create strategies to mitigate their influence on the firm's performance. Again, here is a general structure of the marketing plan. Again, we have our goals. Or wait, where do I want to start? I don't know why this is still up here. Hold on. Okay. We have already touched on the general structure as it pertains to an executive summary, the situation analysis, the SWOT analysis, and now we're down to marketing goals and objectives. So again, goals are very broad. They're what's going to be accomplished with the marketing strategy. The goals dictate or guide objectives, which are more measurable or specific and essential to planning. And typically you see them stated in quantitative terms to allow companies to measure them precisely. The marketing strategy then is the 4 Ps, by detailing how the firm will gain competitive advantage by doing something better than the competition. Again, here is looking at leveraging the 4 Ps to create a marketing mix that fits. And by have with fits, I mean a lot of different things. I mean, for one, the 4 Ps align with the company, its mission, its vision, its goals and objectives. Okay, so how in this case, Walmart's goal to tap a more wealthy customer segment, they're going to have to change the products that they offer, which now they're creating or offering more expensive products with more luxurious type features, their price points, how they promote them, and ultimately their placement. My guess is they're probably not going to be in store. They might only be online. We'll have to see. But ultimately, you're creating a marketing strategy that's going to need to be aligned with the firm's overarching goals and objectives. And then you implement that, which deals with how is the marketing program going to be executed? Okay, what is it? How is it going to be executed? When? Who's responsible? How is it monitored? What's the cost of the program? The specifics are there. Your marketing implementation, it covers all of that, anything that relates to how the strategy is going to be executed. Your evaluation and control, again, deals with how the results are going to be evaluated and controlled. You're going to have established performance standards. You might even have real-time analysis. I think of like Google Analytics or customer sentiment as it relates to monitoring reviews. And any of those ROI, sales-based metrics could be used. Again, they need to align, those metrics need to align with the overarching goals and objectives of the marketing strategy. Now, I want to say this. Sales and market share those sort of performance metrics are backwards looking. They will be measures of success or failure. However, sales and market share cannot predict the future. In other words, while they're backward looking, they're not always the best measures of forward looking progress. Instead, a company might want to look at customer satisfaction ratings, customer perceptions ratings, customer perceptions of the brand, or brand associations. So in finance, you might talk about positive cash flow and do some cash flow statements. Okay, those cash flow statements are coming, where are they coming from? They're coming from your customers. And so it's very beneficial for marketers to be measuring these more subjective elements, such as customer attitudes towards the brand or towards the product, their satisfaction, their product awareness, their quality perceptions of the product, their perceptions of value. Because generally speaking, these subjective elements in customers' perceptions precede purchase behavior. So such measures of customer attitudes or awareness or perceptions of product quality or value are oftentimes forward-looking measures, which are going to be more indicative of revenue and profits. Okay, so while I just want to say, yes, of course, your objective financial metrics are great. Absolutely. They're going to be used. They aren't necessarily the only metric a customer or a firm should be looking at, particularly when it comes to customers. And again, who writes these plans? It really varies across firms. It could be your marketing manager, your brand manager, your product manager. You could have a marketing consultant hired. It could be your VP of marketing, your marketing director. And typically when you have a large company, marketing plans are written more at like the middle level of management, and then your top level executives might approve the marketing plan. So your president, your chairperson, your CEO. And so the plan really does need to be persuasive to win the belief that this is the direction the company needs to take. Okay, so with that said, I think this is a good preview of what's to come with Gordon's presentation on Wednesday. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day and stay healthy and stay safe.